Welcome to another episode of the Fair One podcast. This is a new segment that we'll be doing. It'll be called Lies, Dirty Lies, and Statistics. I have with me closest thing I know to a genius, Mr. Well, he just goes by one name, kind of like Fedor or Tyson or one of those people. We'll call him Sam. Sam is a mathematician and data analyst for a big bank. He will remain anonymous because people can't just go flocking to him. So Sam's provided a lot of metrics, a lot of data. This is out there. You can reach out and get this data yourself, but he's able to put it in formats with people that aren't too bright like myself are able to start to analyze it a little bit. In my coaching background, I have used data like this before. I have used people like Sam before to help me build patterns on fighters and opponents. But Sam now probably is one of the most comprehensive people I've worked with this. What we hope to do in the future, guys, is to be able to build this. Sam and I are just learning with, working with each other to do stuff like this. But we want to be able to break the fights down live and have the metrics to support what we're saying or what people are asking us, so people start to get a better understanding of the use of the stats as well, because just because something's on stats, it doesn't mean that it's 100% right. So that's the end of my introduction to Sam, one of the greatest people and a great mathematical mind. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen. He wants to remain anonymous. That is his face if you want to search him up. So welcome, Sam. Thank you so much.
Thank you. What an intro. And I've got my Tinder pick up there.
Excellent. All right. So we're going to talk today. We're going to try and break down this fight with Aljamain Sterling and Sean O'Malley. We have the metrics up. I don't know do you think, Sam, I should give just my overview of it, or should we just keep walking and talking, and you can talk us through all of the slides? And how do you want to do this, you think?
Yeah, I don't mind kicking it off.
All right.
So
let's go.
Yeah, just looking at this first one, on the right-hand side is like probably a key one to kind of discuss as well, because in the UFC a lot, when you see on the actual fights, you'll see the percentage of accuracy coming up for significant strikes and everything else. So on the right-hand side, we see the accuracy of each fighter across various attacking components. O'Malley is much more accurate, so therefore there's less wasted effort and that's kind of like the initial takeaway. But it can also be reflective of their opponents. For the most part, they're all fighting different people, and we're not really comparing like for like. So while he does have a greater accuracy, they are looking at different fighters as well.
I think an important thing to note, though, one is that, but I still think that O'Malley that's allowed O'Malley to get a lot of reps in and to get very comfortable in the octagon. He just hasn't fought the caliber of opponent that Sterling has fought. So it's interesting. So if we look at it, O'Malley lands 50% more significant strikes, 113% more head strikes, and 116% more strikes from distance on average per round. And the thing that I find interesting is that O'Malley has higher accuracy across all attacking metrics. And then it shows it here. But again, it's not the same people. It's not the same kind of fighters, and it's certainly not Aljamain Sterling. I think that an interesting thing when I'm talking just not so much to the metrics, but to how I see the striking from O'Malley and from Sterling. I just took down a few notes for Sterling striking. Like, it's high volume, and it's across the board. Like, you see it against Peter Yan in particular. I'm just thinking about him. And I think about Peter Yan because Peter Yan is such a phenomenal striker in his own right. I think he has like 130 amateur boxing fights in Russia, and he's a master of sport in boxing. A master of sport in Russia, and like the old Soviet system as well, meant that an international master of sport meant that you had a podium finish internationally. A master of sport is that you medaled domestically. There could be some variances around the track, like with how it is, but that's more or less what you're talking about. That's the kind of level that he is. And one of the things that allowed Sterling to strike with Yan and then be able to implement his grappling was the fact that he targeted the whole body. And he's also a switch hitter, so he's able to hit you from a whole bunch of different angles. He doesn't have the most knockout power, as you probably were going to see later on. But that I don't think, I think that's not really accurate, because he is a very powerful bantamweight. I just think because his striking is so unconventional, he doesn't have, and I use Peter Yan as an example, because Peter Yan, that classical boxing training means that when the exchanges occur, his feet are always in the right place for the counter. His hands are in the right place for the counter. So he's able to get some big shots off, some big powerful shots off. Whereas Sterling is kind of all over the place in good ways and bad ways. He doesn't set his kicks up with punches. He sets up his punches with kicks. And a lot of the times he turns his head or dips his head away that's completely unconventional and could be exploited. But it's also hard to get that read. And you have to defend his shots. This was my point. Whilst he's not knocking people out, you cannot you have to implement your game. You have to start defending. Like, you can't just implement your game, is the point that I was going to make. Generally, people kick with kickers. You have to kick with kicker, otherwise you capitulate that space. And Aljamain Sterling's kicking game makes you kick back, and then he's ready to grab you and look for a takedown. So that's just, I just wanted to talk on that, just having seen this, having looked at these metrics. I just wanted to push back a little bit on the metrics, because it does look, when you just read that at face value, it does look like O'Malley is by far the higher accuracy. I just wanted to give a little bit of different clarity to that. Do you want to say anything else on that, Sam? Did anything that I'd say make sense or not?
No, it definitely made sense, and you're definitely right. And even like in terms of the accuracy, I think it is somewhat misleading at times, because a fighter can land 9 of 10 strikes, therefore he has a 90% accuracy, but he'll lose to someone with only a 50% accuracy if that fighter hits them 50 times out of 100 strikes. So
right, absolutely. And I think that's going to become evident as well when you see the actual grappling. I mean, there's no lie. Like, nobody thinks that. I think everybody understands that Sterling is the better grappler, and potentially O'Malley's the better striker, and he's definitely, I'd say, the tidier and the cleaner of the two. I think that the reach is more or less the same, like 72-inch reach for O'Malley and at 5'11", and Aljamain Sterling, I think, is a 71-inch, could be 72-inch, at 5'7". But a lot of the times when they do that, it's based off wingspan, and so I definitely say that Aljamain Sterling is the broader of the two, and not necessarily that his arms are like, he's got long arms. But I'd say that that O'Malley has long arms as well. I think that the range is still going to be in O'Malley's favor. You know, like, he's still a taller guy. He still has unorthodox strikes that come from the same chamber. So his hands are low. You can't tell if it's going to be a kick, an overhand right, a lead cross, a jab. His jabs are super quick, and he does so from a switch stance, which is, it's hard to get a read on that, you know. His bladed stance also make it hard for people to grab single legs, which Sterling loves to do. But that bladed stance that he has, whilst good for boxing, good for defending the single leg, also because your hips aren't square, also leaves you open for the calf kick, which I know for sure Aljamain Sterling will start to exploit. And the problem is, once you start to square your hip off to check that, Aljamain Sterling then can start to look for that takedown. So I think that's going to be very interesting. Should we move on to the next one?
Yeah, go for it.
Do you want to talk us through this, Sam?
Yeah, so probably the key takeaway was you'll see in O'Malley's chart on the right-hand side. So this is their accuracy as each round progresses, just for the first 3 rounds. And you can see that for a lot of those ones, like body, like strikes from distance, even like significant strikes and that as well. Ground strikes, O'Malley seems to get more accurate as each round progresses, whereas Sterling, for his first 3 rounds at least, he peaks in the second and kind of drops off in the third.
In fairness, again, I think that a lot of this is being taken from O'Malley for having fought lesser competitions for over 3 rounds versus Sterling having fought a lot of these guys over 5 rounds as well. And so when we look at those averages, I don't think that they're necessarily as accurate because the pacing of a 5-round fight is so different to a 3-round fight. I think also when you look at Sterling, a lot of his training and a lot of his mentality would be based around a 5-round fight. So I think whilst it's interesting how Sean appears to become more and more accurate as the rounds progress, it's interesting to me, like the fact that I think their approaches to the fight would be very, very different. I think that another thing that he does. Sorry?
I was just going to say, if anything, he'd be expending a lot more energy in that third round as he's just emptying the tank. So if that's what he's used to, a 5-round fight might be totally different for him as well.
He'll definitely come in prepared. He's got smart people around him as well. But I was going to say another thing is his ability to use range. Like he switches stance and he's able to, because he's got long arms as well, he's able to switch, like say, for example, southpaw to orthodox, right? So he switches southpaw to orthodox and he uses his lead hand to start gauging your range and distance, takes the distance away from you as well, makes you reach, and then he counters. He's able to change angles really quickly and uses like counter cross combinations. I think that also lends to the fact that because he's a counter striker doing that sort of thing, a lot of his offense doesn't come from, whereas Aljamain Sterling will throw kicks and punches to try and land something he might throw a bunch of kicks, but he's not really looking to. He's polished up a lot now. He's polished up a lot more now, where he is starting to angle off and hit on the counter a little bit, Aljamain Sterling. But Sean is trying to draw the attack out of you, and so a lot of his attack comes from him finding that range, from him pouring out with his lead hand, creating that distance, feinting so he's able to do a lot of those types of things in his offense without actually throwing a strike. And so when you throw a strike, he's a sniper, he throws it back. So his level of accuracy, whilst he is accurate, is even higher on the charts. I don't know if would that be accurate with what I'm saying?
Like it just makes sense. It makes sense with the data that's on there, but it doesn't. You can't really use the data to explain that. But yeah, but it does line up.
Well, that's kind of how I would see that. A lot of his offense is not necessarily based on him actually throwing a punch. It's just based on him feinting and trying to get you off your game. You have to attack. And Aljamain does that as well, but it's a little bit different. Aljamain will jab the body, jab the head, calf kick, high kicks, and he does it in unorthodox fashion. So I think the percentage of his strikes will be lower that actually.
There's also probably a point to add to that. What is a significant strike, and how?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who determines that as well?
It's very hard. One of the things, say for example, with a significant strike, you jab someone and it hits here below. It hits like below the eye socket, right on the orbital. It doesn't do a huge amount of damage. It doesn't break the orbital. It doesn't shut their eye. It just kind of snaps their head back, and it looks very. It's gonna score a point. It's a significant head strike, but somebody lands like a very hard calf kick. There's still 1-for-1 significant strike. It doesn't change. You know what I mean? But that calf kick, if it landed flush, has the potential to stop your movement and to stop your movement later in the fight. So the significant strikes, again, they're not all created equal. So moving right along. Sorry,
the,
Sam, you going to say?
You've said to me in the past, even with with a calf kick and it hits the peroneal nerve.
Yeah, peroneal nerve, yeah.
Then you can't even walk afterwards. So while it doesn't seem like much, you'd think a head strike is going to be the one you're going for. But if you can get it in the right spot.
Well, just over time, like say, for example, liver shots and other body shots, they will affect it later in the fight. So it's hard to gauge that as well, So what was more significant? Sometimes you don't think people watching a fight and they don't understand a fighter got gassed out later in the fight, but he ate 3 or 4 body shots. Pereira versus Adesanya, if you watch their first fight, like absolute credit to Adesanya's durability, but people don't understand the amount of body shots that Pereira landed on Israel. And it definitely would have taken its toll. It definitely would have started to slow Israel down towards the end of the fight. Having said that, it just speaks volumes to Israel's durability, which I think is one of his most underrated assets. Like people talk about his movement, his this, his that, Yeah, but it's his durability as well. I mean, his movement helps his durability, absolutely. But you have to be very, very special to have fought over 100 combat fights and be stopped twice. You know what I mean? That's pretty impressive. So anyways, moving.
I was just going to say too, that also makes your point also backs up for Sean O'Malley's accuracy increasing as each round progresses. It can also be a reflection of not O'Malley actually increasing his accuracy, but his opponent slowing down as each round goes by.
Absolutely. And that's also got to do with what's the opponent being made to do. Is the opponent being made to try and grapple O'Malley, which is going to tire you out if O'Malley can stop the takedowns? Does that mean also the caliber of opponent may not necessarily be able to withstand O'Malley's onslaught for 3 rounds? I don't know. You see it in the Peter Yan fight. I personally think Peter Yan won that fight. I don't think it was a robbery. It was a close fight. It's close enough that I don't disagree with the decision, if that makes sense. Whilst I think Peter Yan won, it was a close enough fight that, okay, it's fair enough. But in that fight, you see that he didn't have it all his way, and I'd be, which we will be looking into that fight in this presentation. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Do you want to take us through this next slide, Sam?
Yeah, so the previous slide kind of needs to be used in conjunction with this one as well, because this has the actual average strikes landed per round as well. And you can see again that clearly O'Malley strikes, his average landed strike, he lands a lot more than Sterling, and he increases as each round goes by. So therefore he's throwing more, and he's throwing more with increased accuracy as each round goes by as well. But yeah, same with the same caveats as before, that Sterling has had more 5-round fights and everything else. So there's a bit of a different game plan there too.
But you still can't, even though the level of opponent probably isn't as high, not probably, absolutely isn't as high, you still have to take into account that he is landing, he's throwing more strikes and with greater accuracy. That's he does it. If you watch O'Malley do it, he does it with an ease of movement, like his ability to move and switch between stances and cut different angles and flow between stances allows him to create really, really good offensive sequences without you being able to get the reads on it. So I find that,
yeah. Oh, I was even just going to say head strikes and strikes from distance. Like he's basically doubled Sterling
in those first 3 rounds. Yeah. That's still like what you know what I mean. Like that still has to be seen. Like you can't just go, no, that doesn't think. So it shows that he's to me, that shows that he does have ability to stay calm under fire as well. Like you see him hurt opponents, and he just he doesn't lose his cool. He just kind of hunts them down, and he's able to. Man, the way he's throwing like the right roundhouse kicks to the head, left roundhouse kicks to the head with not much tell, especially once he gets somebody hurt. He's able to throw knees up the middle like he threw against Peter Yan with no tell. That these are things that are very you have to note that, and that he's able to do that under duress as the fight progresses. This is important. Should we move on from this slide because we kind of addressed a lot of the stuff from the other one? Okay, do you want to talk us through this?
Yeah, so just looking at grappling performance between each of them. So there's obviously a clear advantage that Sterling has over O'Malley in terms of just his takedowns. And on the left-hand side, you've got the total takedowns for each of their UFC career. Obviously, Aljamain's had so many more fights. I think he's had 52 rounds in total in the UFC. So he's just had so many more advantage, so much more time to actually perform takedowns. But he does obviously do a lot of takedowns. And then on the right hand side, you've got the average per round as well. So he just has a clear favor towards wrestling and grappling, and that everybody knows already anyway. But it just shows it a lot more in the charts as well.
I think when you see it, the thing is, it's not like O'Malley can't grapple. O'Malley can't. I don't know if this is accurate either. This is just an interesting point. The jiu-jitsu guy that gave Tanquinho, which is I think his name's Augusto Mendes. That dude is the one that gave O'Malley his brown belt. He fought and lost to Sterling back in the day. Just an interesting little point. I don't know if they still work together. I don't know the ins and outs of it. I do know that little tidbit of information. I think one of the things that's interesting is the fact that O'Malley does fight from range and that he's so good at it, but he does give up some of the center of the octagon to skirt the periphery of the octagon to draw the striking out of you. And I think this is a difficult thing for him against Sterling, because Sterling, whilst he's a All-American Division III wrestler, a lot of times that's got to do more with the size of the school than your ability as a wrestler. Like sometimes I just give a little bit of information on that type of stuff. Sometimes you see somebody won junior college, right? Junior college is not as big as Division I wrestling, but a lot of the times those guys that are going to junior college is just because it's not going to TAFE here in Australia or something like that. Like you might not have got the marks to go to a Division I school academically. That has zero impact on your ability to wrestle. Or you might not have wanted to travel to a school further away and you went to a Division III college or something. So it's not necessarily always indicative of who you are as a wrestler. That's number one. Number two is I think that while what I said before, like you have to kick with a kicker, you can't capitulate that space. This is in general. Like so if you're striking with someone and they kick, if you don't kick them and you're just trying to box with them, they won that space. You can't get in there. So when he kicks you, you have to kick him back. This allows him to look for single legs. This allows him to take you off balance. This allows you to move him to move you back, even if he can't finish the takedown. He's got long arms. He has got long arms, and he's a bigger guy in that division. Well, he's not the tallest, but he is a bigger guy. And once he pins you up against that cage and he can lock those hands behind you, that's when you start to see the use of his double leg. And you see him being able to take down guys like Henry Cejudo that are gold medalists in wrestling. Of course, it's not a wrestling match, but he had a wrestling match with Roman Bravo Young, Penn State Division I wrestler, amazing wrestler. He had a wrestling match with him where they had a freestyle match and a jiu-jitsu match as well. He submitted Bravo Young in the jiu-jitsu match. Big fan of Bravo Young, by the way, and he will make his way to MMA as well. And he's going to be a fucking force to be reckoned with in that division. So he submitted Bravo Young in a jiu-jitsu match, and he lost to him in a freestyle wrestling match, as you'd probably imagine that would happen. Having said that, though, it shows that he's still current. He's still industry current in the grappling and wrestling department. Specifically in the wrestling, I think that I find that very interesting because you see a lot of the guys in MMA compete in grappling, but you don't see it as much in wrestling. So the fact that he even had to prepare for someone of the caliber of a Bravo Young in wrestling is telling to him keeping his wrestling sharp and improving. A lot of the guys come through to MMA from a wrestling or jiu-jitsu background, but they don't continue to improve the skill set, you know. And I'm a firm believer in you have to dance with the girl you went with, you know, and not a lot of them continue to improve. He does have good upper body clinch work. I know Mighty Mouse recently came out and said he doesn't. I think it's probably true in as far as he might not have it in comparison to Mighty Mouse, but he is a big guy, long arms, the levers. One of the things I was going to say about Sean O'Malley, it's hard to gauge until you're in there with guys that are that tall for the division, because what happens is the center of gravity becomes different. A guy like Israel, a guy like Pereira, there's different stages. O'Malley, there's Sandhagen. If they know how to use their length, they're able to frame before the takedown occurs from a longer distance. Once they get taken down, they can put their arms out in different ways, and the center of gravity changes. So that can cause a problem. Having said that, little guys, Volkanovski, Cejudo, and that, Demetrius Johnson, being shorter guys, they're able to get their legs in underneath them as well quicker. So there's pros and cons to different body types, but I'm just touching on that. He does a fantastic job. Nothing that I'm saying here is new. Anyone can see this, but he does a fantastic job of looking for the back. And one of the things that he does when he looks for the back, he looks for the far hook. And he gets that far hook first. Especially like you see him trying to get that far hook against the cage, which is hard to do. It's hard to do. Volkanovski does this very well too. Volkanovski gets his hips between you and the cage, and then he bumps you and lifts you up, and he looks for that far hook. So, yeah, that's something that he does really, really well. His chokes, obviously, he's hunting for rear naked chokes. That makes it, a lot of the times when you're hunting for the rear naked choke, it makes it easier for you to get your second hook in. We were going over that in class the other day. So it's very, very hard. The fact that he's continued to improve his grappling, the fact that he's continued to improve and he continues to hone his grappling skills and stay industry current, you know, is very, very telling. I think that's one of the things that's made him improve, because while his striking got better, his grappling also got better. So that's one of the big ones. Anything else you want to touch on with this, Sam?
Just a couple of things, but one thing was just your point before about like his wrestling and that as well. I just Wikipedia'd it as well, and Sterling was unable to catch up with the grades to reach Division 1.
Perfect.
So it might not have been
Yeah, I hadn't seen that in itself, but like a lot of the times, and this is another. I'm a teacher by trade, and I still work in education. A lot of the times, like academia has nothing to do with your level of intelligence, anyways. So there are myriad of factors as to why somebody didn't necessarily go to a Division 1 school. It could be financial as well. You might only been offered a partial scholarship, might have been offered a walk-on, and you couldn't afford to go to a big university, you know. So there's a whole bunch of factors as to why. So you can't just look at it sometimes and go, oh, Division 3, not as good. Not necessarily, you know. Even if you did have a full ride scholarship, sometimes there might be other factors why you couldn't financially afford to go and live away. You might have had to work, you know, who knows? There's a lot of factors is my point. And so Sam just having the ability to do that. Now it's good to have somebody on the podcast that was able to affirm that. So
you also
do you want to talk?
I was just going to say before, while we're still on takedowns, you also mentioned.
I'll go back to takedowns. So you want me to go back?
Right. Yeah, much. But you also mentioned before O'Malley has good knees up the middle that are imperceptible.
Yep.
Does that mean it's kind of Sterling maybe open to those in those takedowns as well?
He could, but I think that more importantly, yes, he is. He could be, but I think the biggest thing is sometimes Sterling dips his head and looks away during the striking exchanges. And I do think that they're the kind of things that you can exploit more than the knees up the middle. But definitely, any grappler that's fighting a tall, lanky guy, the knees up the middle are a problem. That's 100%. The front kicks are a big thing. Because they're both switch hitters, and they both like the front kick up the middle. Both these guys do. The front kick up the middle, specifically when it's southpaw to orthodox, is a massive weapon, in particular to the body, just because the hips are a little bit more open. So that's a big one, straight up. And that front kick to the body, southpaw to orthodox, pushes you back to the distance that pushes your opponent back to a distance that you feel more comfortable managing.
Makes sense.
All right. Do you want to talk about this one, Sam?
Yeah, so it's obviously not just taking your opponent down, but what you do when you're actually down there as well. So just looking at like total ground control. And again, on the chart on the left, it's the total ground control over the UFC career. So he's obviously had a lot more chances as well. But then that middle chart with the average ground control per round. So over his UFC career, he's taken down a lot of opponents and he's kept them down. And he's controlled them throughout the whole round. So he has such a big advantage on that. He's got nearly a minute and a half on average.
Sorry, I'll just say the body triangle is probably one of the bigger reasons why that ground control is so out of whack. He as they call him, the human backpack, because he does take your back, put the body triangle on, and you can't get him off. Sorry, Sam, you were saying. I just wanted to clarify that.
No, that's perfect. Yeah. While it might not be as entertaining for most people, it wins fights. Think of the Makachev Volkanovski fight.
It can be the difference between what in a close fight. Yeah, in a close fight, you take someone's back, and this is the thing people talk about. This if you take someone's back, right, it is not just you're not doing damage or whatever, because you're only a very split hair away from them making a mistake and you've been able to choke. Taking the back mount is the most dominant position in combat sports. You can't, if you put both hooks in and flatten someone so their nose is on the ground, there's no more dominant position than that. You cannot fight back. This is not it's not just you held them down. This is a position where you're one mistake away from getting choked, and that has to be taken into account when you're judging a fight as well. It's not just you took a person down and you're holding them down. The body triangle is a very effective position. You know what I mean? It's you're one position away from a submission, and this is what Sterling's going for.
And you're constantly tearing out your opponent as well in that body triangle too, because it's uncomfortable.
Oh yeah. If the thing you got to remember with body triangles though is it's also fatiguing on your own legs if you're doing it for prolonged periods of time. But someone like Sterling, who's obviously that's his bread and butter, his legs will be conditioned to that to a big degree. But you do see with guys that it's not necessarily their forte, and they're holding on and they're using a massive isometric contraction. That wears out your legs as well. Anything else? When you whilst you know that there's a difference with their ground, when you see it in a graph like this and you see it right next to each other, you realize just how much that difference is. And O'Malley can grapple, man. O'Malley can grapple. There's no question on whether or not he can grapple. The other thing is, in that Peter Yan fight, O'Malley versus Peter Yan, whilst he didn't get to finish the takedown, he shot a really, really nice takedown on Peter Yan. Peter Yan went back into high parterre, and O'Malley couldn't finish the takedown, but it was a really nice takedown. But having said that, Aljamain Sterling has shown a remarkable ability to be able to wrestle up. He's got really good guard, really good work off his back, especially for a wrestler. Like a lot of times they don't tend to have that ability from their back, and he does have a really good ability from his back. Anything else on this end?
Probably just noting on the chart on the right, like it's just the maximum ground control they've had in a round in the UFC. So Sterling's had a round where he's had 4.5 minutes of ground control. So obviously that body triangle, I'm assuming, is going to be key. But 4.5 minutes is a long time to control
in a 5-minute round. In a 5-minute round, yeah.
Yeah, he's taken him down
and
early.
He's not,
and he's into it. So
sorry, I spoke over you then. Yeah, so you were saying?
No, I just said he's taken him down early in the round and then controlled him for the entire round. So yeah,
and you have to remember the guys that he's doing it to. He's had multiple title defenses. If he wins this fight, it'll be 10 in a row, 10 wins in a row at bantamweight. So the guys that he's doing it to are not newcomers to the UFC. This isn't a knock on O'Malley. O'Malley has done a lot in a short amount of time, but the caliber of opponents that Sterling has done it to is higher. You know what I mean? And he's been able to do that. All right. So now, do you want to talk us through this, Sam?
Yeah, it's like this is pretty simple too. It's just like total submission attempts, and then like average submission attempts per round. So there's obviously like again, Sterling just once he's got him on the ground, he's obviously more experienced in his grappling and that, and his wrestling as well. So he's got higher submissions and stuff. But yeah, it's probably not too much to break that down as well.
I will say this: when you attack someone and you take their back, he has a finish with a Sulyev leg lock, which is kind of like a hip lock, but still like that. But when you take someone's back, that's my point. Is like they don't have much other than escaping. They don't have really any submissions, any real submissions. For a guy like Sterling, like I know people are going to say, yeah, if you cross your feet, he could submit you. Fucking good luck. You know what I mean? Good luck with someone like Sterling on your back. So that allows him. What's that?
Or even just him to make the mistake of crossing his feet. Like,
yeah, but you can cross your feet. You can cross your feet. It's just where you cross them. He's not going to give them to you in a position where you're going to be able to do that anyways. That allows him to pretty much go for as many submissions as he likes. He can go for rear naked choke after rear naked choke until you mess up. He, like all wrestlers, he's also going to be a big threat with any head arm kind of chokes or anything like that, which he is good at. But the thing I think that sets him apart from a lot of other wrestlers is his ability to go to the back, keep the back, and look for rear naked chokes and look for chokes. And yeah, just he's a dangerous man when he's on your back. Yeah, so is that moving on from this one?
Yeah, probably, because the next one's probably the more important one of when you're actually on the ground, because you kind of you separate out, grappling and striking and then in general, but yeah, ground strikes is really where MMA kind of combines them all, I suppose, as well. But he's got a clear advantage, and obviously he's taken so many opponents to the ground. He's so on the left-hand side is his total for UFC. For his UFC career, but then on the right-hand side is the average per round. So obviously by nature of performing more takedowns and having more ground control, he's also going to strike more as well. But yeah, just a clear advantage for Sterling in ground strikes as well.
I think that's pretty much speaks for itself, because we touched on a lot of these things prior when we were talking about the grappling, so we're not going to go into it too much more. But he does do a lot more work on the ground. Do you want to talk us through this, Sam?
Yeah, so I just did basically the same thing for each fighter, but just looking at their fights with PDN. So obviously Sterling's had the 2 fights with PDN, so we're just looking at the averages and that per round. Again, like O'Malley has a higher accuracy with the exception of takedowns, body, and ground strikes. And then, yeah, just total landed though, average landed per round on except for body. Sean O'Malley against Peter Yan. So, but it also, in saying that too, we're looking at just one particular fight, but what we don't have on there is what Peter Yan answered with as well. We only have the strikes that these fighters, not what the strikes that Peter Yan threw back.
Right. I think that, to me, one of the big things that I saw in that fight, Peter Yan's striking speaks for itself, and he's a very good grappler, man. People don't understand. He's a good grappler. But I think that the way that he capitalized, he did really nice outside trips on both these guys in their fights, right? This was really good, in particular with Sterling in their first fight. He was doing these outside trips and breaking up Sterling's rhythm, but he wasn't confident enough. It didn't go far enough. We wouldn't be able to say who would have won their first fight, which Sterling won by disqualification. But had that not have happened, I don't know who would have won that fight. I am, just so people understand this, a massive Peter Yan fan, but I can't say to you he would have won that fight. He looked like he was on the way to winning that fight, but I can't say that he would have won because he fucking didn't. The thing that I was going to say though is what I said earlier, right at the start, was about Sean O'Malley giving up the center of the octagon, skirting the peripheries just by nature as it happens, because he's trying to draw out the attack so that he can counter. And Peter Yan's ability to use that against the cage to get the takedown, I think, is a very key point, because Peter Yan does not have the same, while he's very physical, he doesn't have the same physical attributes or necessarily the wrestling pedigree that Aljamain Sterling has. So that's being on the peripheries of the octagon, Peter Yan was able to capitalize on that and get the takedowns with the double legs. He was able to do that numerous times to Sean O'Malley, and I think that's going to be a massive point against Sterling. I think Sterling's going to be able to do that to him, unless he gets caught on the way in. I don't see any other way. I don't see O'Malley being able to stop Sterling over the course of 25 minutes from taking him down at least 3 or 4 times. I don't see that unless he catches him with something. He's very comfortable in the grapple and in the scrambles, which is why they call him Funk Master, because of his funky wrestling style, and he's able to bring scrambles into that situation and land on top, land in the better positions. I think, just like a kind of early prediction teaser kind of thing, is the same thing with Hamzat and Paulo Costa, for example. They're not similar fighters, but just one of the points that I'm going to make is, like, I think that Hamzat against Paulo Costa, Hamzat's ability to create the scrambles he's going to land in a better position. He's going to shoot on Paulo Costa. He's going to scramble with him, and he's going to land in a better position. And whilst going back to the O'Malley and Sterling fight, O'Malley has good scrambles. He showed some kind of modified Granby roll against Peter Yan. It didn't work every time, but it worked. I just don't see him being able to do that against a guy like Sterling, who's a dyed-in-the-wool collegiate wrestler, able to wrestle freestyle, able to grapple as well. He's a high-level grappler. I think in all those scrambles, Sterling's going to get the better of it, and that's what I see with that. Anything else you want to add, Sam?
Oh, no, we can probably go to the next one, but it's also worth kind of noting that while we're comparing the performance of these two guys against one single fighter, you kind of can't really go like, it's not like fighter A beats fighter A beats fighter B beats fighter C, therefore fighter A is going to beat fighter C. Do you know what I mean? You can't really
Absolutely. You can't. MMA maths. Yeah.
Yeah. They're going to line up differently. They're going to train differently. They can have different game plans and everything else. But yeah, it's just interesting to have them kind of lined up together anyway. But yeah, for this one even, you can see that even in the third round, Sterling, body strikes, leg strikes, distance, ground strikes, obviously, once he's on the ground on the third round and stuff. So his accuracy obviously increases, which is kind of different to what we saw earlier throughout his whole career. So against Peter Yan, it's slightly different as well. And then Sean O'Malley, really the head, body, and significant strikes have kind of increased as each round progresses. But again, it kind of has to be.
Sorry, go on.
What? Just kind of has to use with the next slide. Yeah.
I was just going to say it's consistent with the first slide that we saw, with O'Malley being more accurate and throwing more strikes as the rounds progress. And whilst I said that, I do give the caveat that whilst I said that wasn't against the high level opponents, it absolutely is against Peter Yan. And Peter Yan is about as high level opponent as you're going to get in that bantamweight division. Although he has lost a few in a row, but that against the very, very top of the food chain guys, and close decisions too, Merab, Sterling and O'Malley are no bums, so he's up there, right up there with anyone. But Sean O'Malley did show the consistency in him throwing with accuracy and increasing volume and accuracy as the fight continued. So that's very, very important. Do you want to talk us through this, Sam?
Yeah, so it kind of needs to be used in conjunction with the one before as well. That's why you have the accuracy and the actual total landed as well. And you can see like in that third round against Peter Yan, O'Malley really kind of turned it on. So total strikes, he pretty much doubled from his previous from the previous 2 rounds as well. Same with significant strikes as well. So his output was a lot more as well.
And I think that's very telling. That's a very telling thing, because if you can't, grappling is extremely tiring. Offensive grappling is extremely tiring. And if you can't, the saving grace for Sterling is that's what he looks for, is the control on the ground. He looks to grab you and get you down there and hold you down there. So if you're able to do that, it's not as taxing on you, on the offensive grappler. But offensive grappling where you can't get somebody down, it makes it very, very difficult. It's very tiring. And when you're fighting a guy that gets more accurate and it throws with greater volume as the fight progresses, this is a big problem for an offensive grappler. And out of the two, that tidy, striking, fluent boxing is very hard to cope with. And if Aljamain Sterling does have problems getting O'Malley to the ground, I think that O'Malley is going to catch him. Anything else you want to say? Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, it does look in this they're obviously a clear advantage for O'Malley in terms of striking. And you'll notice on the left-hand side with Aljamain Sterling, he's got a cut, the takedowns there are only so small because you only need to complete one takedown. He only needs to complete one takedown and actually hold the opponent down for so long, and have that control through the whole round. And while he's doing that, he doesn't really need to, it's the rules of the game. He doesn't really need to strike him at all. He can just control the whole round and win that round just based off one takedown. So
right. All right. Well, then, who do you have winning this fight? That's the $1 million question, and why?
I'm probably going to have a stab in the dark, but I'd probably pick Sterling just because I think that O'Malley, every time if he does clip him at all, which he definitely will, but when he does hit him, Sterling will just have that ability to shoot and shoot and shoot like he did with Cejudo as well, and just continue to try and take him down all the time. Once he does get him once, then he can just control him from there.
I think that If I have to pick, I'm going to pick Sterling. If having said that, I think that if it becomes like a fight where there's takedowns and takedowns and it goes up and down and everything, then I think Sterling's going to win that fight. I think Sterling's going to win it. Having said that, I think that O'Malley has a very good chance of catching him. If O'Malley can catch him and start to stop the takedowns early, which I don't think he'll be able to do, but if he starts to stop those takedowns in the first couple of rounds, according to the statistics and the data that we see, his ability to increase the volume and the accuracy will become a very big problem for Sterling. But I don't think that he'll be able to stop the takedown early, and I do think that Sterling will get him down, and I think that Sterling will win. But just keep that in your head. If you see O'Malley start to stop the takedowns, that he does get more accurate, he does hit with greater volume, and that's going to be the big problem for Aljamain Sterling if he can't get and secure takedowns early. I guess that's it for us, Sam.
Sick. Too easy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on here, Sam. We do hope. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. We will be doing more of these. This is the first time we're doing it. We look to improve. Please write down in your comments who you think will win and why. Ask us any questions you want to ask, and we'll try and do a statistical breakdowns using data and proper metrics, not just throwing out what we think will happen. And right now, guys, I have to go and cook a tomahawk steak and a barbecue and pizzas in my pizza oven, which, Sam, you have earned yourself a pizza from the pizza oven. So, guys, please like and subscribe, guys. Thank you so much for being here and watching. And please let us know in the comments what we could do better, what you'd like to hear, what other things. We will work on trying to make this interactive so that people can ask us stuff and we're able to bring up the data in real time. That's what we're aiming to do. Sam is the one that's the brains behind this, and he's the one that's building everything for us to be able to use the data interactively. So once again, guys, thank you very much. Join me tomorrow to watch the fights live and have commentary and watch along. So thank you very much, guys. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Take care, guys. Thank you very much.